Welcome to Streams of Income with self-help author Ryan Rieger. For the next hour, you'll hear proven methods for how to live the multiple income streams dream. Ryan is passionate about helping others discover their gifts and start their own business. He's published 5 books, and his courses and group coaching programs have changed the lives of thousands of students all over the world. Ryan's books include Private Label, The Easy Way, Finding Your Grace Place, and his latest, Streams of Income. And now, here's your host, Ryan Rieger.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Streams of Income radio show. I'm your host, Ryan Rieger. Today we are chatting with Doug Seebeck. He's the CEO of Partners Worldwide, the author of a book called My Business, My Mission. Quick backstory here. So you guys know I'm a Christian, and I have wondered for a long time how I can use my skill set in business, this weird niche skill set of building an online business. How can I use that to benefit the kingdom of God? And so literally one day in 2016, I was writing down or looking, I was praying about and I started Googling using business as missions. And I found a group, an organization called BAM, Business as Mission. And they were having a conference that September here in Dallas. So I went to that conference, met some people, and just started exploring how I can use what I'm doing in business to be a blessing to the world around me and use it essentially like as a missionary would. And so I've been in the BAM movement, talking to different folks, getting involved here and there, mostly with just donations but always in the back of my mind, wondering how else I can be helpful. And I know that I'm doing that with my virtual assistant service. I'm creating jobs in the Philippines, and that's awesome. But I recently was on the BAM site looking at just other ways, other people that are what they're doing. They had a virtual conference this year that I attended, made some more connections, and came along across this book on their website and started reading about Doug Seebeck and his story. He and his wife, Gail, moved to Kenya and then to Uganda and just started businesses and started helping the local population. And then he came back and started an organization called Partners Worldwide. And it really just comes down to connecting business owners here with business owners globally. And he said that is the way to end poverty. Rather than giving them handouts, you are, us as business owners, entrepreneurs, we know stuff. We know how to start and grow a business. We know what failure is like and how to pivot and how to overcome challenges. And those are valuable skills. And so with Partners Worldwide, they're connecting business owners like me with people all over the world to create a business over in their country and create jobs and end poverty globally. That is their goal. And so I had an awesome conversation with Doug. If you have ever thought wondering about what your place is and how you can actually be a business owner and be a blessing still, because there is this thinking that, unless you're a pastor or unless you're a missionary, that you are not really doing God's work, that you aren't really important in the kingdom of God. But guys, that is a lie. We as business owners have knowledge, we have skills. These are things that God has placed in us. And yes, we can use them to be a blessing to the world. And so if this intrigues you at all, you're going to love this episode with Doug. It's an awesome conversation about his story, what he's doing in the world, and how we as business owners can be involved. Here's my interview with Doug. Doug, welcome to Streams of Income Radio, my friend. So good to meet you.
Thank you, Ryan. You also.
We had an awesome conversation right before we hit record already. I think we're just could be ending right there, but I love what you're doing. I want my audience to hear your story of getting into business, starting Partners Worldwide, how you met your wife, anything you feel like is relevant to my business audience. So, guys, this is Doug.
Thanks, Ryan. So I often ask people that, how did we get here? Tell me your story. And so I'll tell you this. I wouldn't be talking to you today, Ryan, if I hadn't gone to Bangladesh at the age of 21.
Wow.
And I wouldn't have gone to Bangladesh if I hadn't had this class when I was 19 I was an ag business guy. I grew up on a family farm, you know, in a small Eastern Washington farming community, you know, small town, church, all that. And went to a Christian school for the first 8 years. And I found out later when they asked me to speak at a 40th anniversary or something that my grandpa, my mom's dad, had mortgaged his dairy to start that Christian school. And then I went to public high and I went to university. But when I was 19, I had this class. I decided I was going to go into agricultural business, and I had a class, and all Aggies heard this. I experienced this class, but the prof, and it was on the blackboard. It was the very first session, and he talked about he had a graph up there with the years here and the world population horizontally, and at the start they were together, and then population went like this. And food production went like this, and there was a big gap. I think it was around 2030. There was a big gap, and I was 19, and I thought, "Wow, that's in my lifetime." And it was the Malthusian theory, Thomas Malthus, 1800s, and I remember seeing that gap, and I thought, this man does not understand the nature of God and people created in His image and their creativity and unlimited potential. I didn't realize that Thomas Malthus was a pastor and an economist.
Wow.
Right? And he was a contemporary to Adam Smith. I don't know what exactly, but that was that class and that graph is what I thought that was my call. Looking back.
Yeah.
And I even wrote a letter. So it was my sophomore year, and I wrote a letter to our church denomination. They had an organization that was their diaconal outreach globally. And I wrote a letter and said, "Hey, I'm going to finish all my requirements this year. I'm going to go into my major. If I was to be an agricultural missionary, what courses would you advise me to take?" And, you know, I don't know how they would have answered that in 1975, right?
Did that even exist? An agricultural missionary?
Right. Exactly. And so I got a form letter back. It was 1 page, 3 paragraphs typed out. And I knew it was a cut and paste letter, you know, they sent to everybody. And I remember reading that, and I chucked it across the room and said, "Okay, I'm going into business. I'm going to have a big farm. I'm going to have my own plane, a lot of employees." So that was sophomore year. And now I'm in my senior year, and I'm interviewing for jobs. And I had just signed a contract with a consulting company, and I was looking at something in Saudi Arabia, all kinds of things that, you know, one that was global, but all the jobs were really a selling product. This company was selling knowledge, and so it intrigued me. It was a founder, and he was looking for someone to you know, take his place, and so I felt really good about that. And it was to help farmers get a better ROI, use data, soil testing, petio, all that stuff. It was not just selling fertilizer or something like that. And so I just signed that contract, and I was real excited. And then I was part of Alpha Gamma Rho fraternity. A guy from my church talked me into going there, but one of my classmates came in. It was a Sunday night, and he got the banner. It was our church publication, and why he was getting the banner at this fraternity, it was wild. But there was a party going on outside. I was studying for an exam. He came in and said, "Doug, look at this." And in the back cover, it said it was the jobs area. It said urgently needed agronomists in Haiti and Bangladesh. And I go, "Oh no." And I remembered that class.
Oh no.
And so, yeah, really, it was like, it just leaped out of the page at me.
Yeah.
And he said, "I don't know if you're interested in this." I got up at 5:30 the next morning. We had wake up calls. It was 8:30 in Michigan time. I called their 800 number, and I got this real, I asked for, you know, this agency, and I got a friendly lady, and I said, "Listen, I just saw your ad. I already have a job. I'm not looking for a job, but if you think I can serve, I will apply. And we had a long conversation. Anyway, long story short, they sent me the application form in snail mail. I filled it out, sent it back, and they asked me to come interview. And I had finished my final exams. You had a little gap between your exams and your walking, you know, and came back and did that interview. And I just got my mind opened up to a whole other world. But what was so interesting about it was when I asked the guy, he said, "You're going to help these poor farmers. You know, they can't even produce enough food to feed their families. They're starving." And Bangladesh in 1978 was a young nation. It was a tough time, right? Yeah. They had lost 3 million people to the war with Pakistan becoming, Bangladesh. Wow. Time magazine has the cover, the bloody birth of Bangladesh, and they had the world's worst cyclone, killed 500,000 people. It was just a mess. Gosh. And so when I asked this guy, so if we're doing this, how do we pay for do they pay for these services? And he just laughed. He said, "No, they're too poor." He said, I said, "Well, how do you pay for me?" He said, "You're gonna," because I was in this business where successful farmers were paying me for some knowledge they didn't have. And he said, "We got supporting churches for that." Anyway, I share that because I said, "Oh," and I remember thanking God that I didn't think I would get paid. I said, "Oh man."
Yeah. Did you have to raise your support, or they did it for you?
No, they did it. See,
that's good.
Anyway, so I fly back home and I start to read up on Bangladesh and Haiti and decide I don't want to go to Bangladesh. I want to go to Haiti. That'd be easier. And then I go to work at my job and I don't hear anything. And then I don't know if it was 3 months later, I get this letter and they say, "We want you to go to Bangladesh." And I was terrified. Oh man! But anyway, that experience of working with these very small scale, poorest of the poor farmers, it just, they were so talented, so hardworking. Yeah. And really, they taught me, I just asked questions. I didn't know anything about rice. And that was the main crop. They're the world's 4th largest producer of rice today in a country the size of Wisconsin.
Because you were there back in the 70s.
Well, yeah. Well, no. But I mean, we had a little part, right? I went back in 2018. I had an opportunity to go back in 2018 and meet this organization that we had started. It was the Bogra district. It was Bogra Extension Education Services. It's the Bangladesh Extension Education Service today. And when I left, we had 4,000 farmers we had helped. Really proud of this. They went from deficit to surplus. Yeah. But that organization today, it's 45 years old, and they're a $120 million organization. They serve about 250,000 families and about 1 million clients. But it's all done sustainably through microcredit, and the profits are used to do all the work in education and healthcare, the things that we were raising money for, right? So I just look at that, so what I'm saying is, I found myself getting when I understood the problems of why these farmers were poor, and Bangladesh was really, it was a very oppressive system at the time, where you had a very small percentage of farmers who lived in the city owning the land, and you had sharecropping, it was brutal. It was 60% would go to the landowner, and the farmers taking all the risks. So I found myself getting really angry and saying, that Chinese proverb is just a bunch of bull crap. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. Give him a fish, eat for the day. So these guys know how to fish. They need access to the pond. Yeah, access to the pond, right? And so I handed over my job to my Bengali counterpart. And anyway, And to see that institution today, that is the picture, Ryan, for the world, right? Yes. And so I was so impacted by that. I'm getting ready to leave, and we had just had a celebration one day we brought in the best farmers and heard their stories, and I couldn't sleep that night. And it was a hot August night, and steamy hot, and I couldn't sleep thinking about all those stories I heard. I said, "Lord, I don't know what I'm going to do when I go back to the States. I'm just 3 years behind all my friends." And I was a pretty competitive guy. Right. They're married. They got businesses. They got, they got houses. I'm just going back to do what I was doing. And by the way, these profs that were teaching me, they're still talking about, they're still in their bubble. I mean, but I said, I think I'm pretty good at this work, but I need a partner. I need someone crazy enough. If you'll give me someone crazy enough to go to countries like this, I'll spend my life working on the end of poverty.
Wow.
That was it. And I come back, and I come back and I meet my wife 5 months later in this inner city church in Grand Rapids that they talked me into coming and working in headquarters for a year. I was going to go back to school. I met her at an inner city church my very first Sunday, and she was.
You said in your book that they brought her up on stage and said she needed some help finding an apartment.
They had this prayer time, and she got up and said, I'm taking this job in Harlem and I need an apartment. Anyway.
And you had a contact.
And I had a contact.
So I read in your book, you said that, and guys, by the way, it's called My Business, My Mission. I'll make sure that the link is in the show notes. But how did you go from, it said you met her that Sunday and you were married 5 months later?
Yes.
I know we could probably have a whole other episode about how that had worked out. And we want to get into the business side too, but real quick, like how did that happen? Like she was moving to New York, but did you guys go to New York for a bit, or did she stay in Michigan?
No, she went to New York. So we had from June 13th, she moved to New York. It was like a month, and I saw her every day for a month, and we talked, and I probably talked.
Did you go up to her after church and say, "Hey, I have a contact in New York"?
Yes, I did. That's exactly what happened. And
okay.
And then we had tea the next day, and talked, and it was like, and then she went. And she didn't take the place that I got for her because it probably wasn't in the right area. And then I went and visited her once, and then we did all this snail mail. We had boxes of letters, and and phones were expensive.
Wow.
But it was you read these letters. It was really like, what's going on? Wow. She was what's going on here, God. And so it was really she came back, which was a huge thing. Came back, and we got married, and everybody was shaking their heads. What's going on? 5 months, but we're celebrating 39 years.
That's awesome. My parents' story is kind of like that. It's not. They got married in August, met that same April, so. That's a similar thing. Interesting. So you guys got married and you moved over to Kenya before going to Uganda, right?
We went to. So at that time, Uganda Idi Amin had been thrown out, and there was a lot of refugees in East Africa, East and Southern Africa. These were all young nations. They were finding their way, and so the idea was, can we do this work? This is with the church. Can we do the work of self-help, knowledge. In ag and healthcare and education and whatnot. Can we do that with refugee communities in other countries? That was kind of the vision, and so that's what we went out to do. But we ended up doing what no one else is doing, trying to get the Ugandans to come back from Southern Sudan. There was 1 million Ugandans displaced, and when we went into the camps in Southern Sudan, and you could just see the disparity. The Ugandans were more educated than the Southern Sudanese. They were more prosperous in where they came from. And every one of them said, we're going to go home at the first opportunity. Yeah. And there was already inequities, between them being benefited from there as refugees and the local Sudanese not. And so that's what we did. And that's how we started. And then just grew from there. Yeah. And it was phenomenal. God, of course, my wife's just amazing. And so we went from there. 5 years in Uganda during the war. We had our first 2 kids born, both of them literally under gunfire. It was a very wild time, but it's like we could do anything at that time. And then we moved to Kenya, and we just started Tanzania next year, and then Malawi, and then Zambia, and we were privileged to get three war orphans from Ethiopia, direct before there was adoptions from the government through the ambassador that my wife worked for in Uganda, ran their health clinic, and we had a little mantra: hey, open another country, get another kid. It was just like, you know, and then along come these business people to see the work in 1992.
Yeah.
And
is that when you met, let's see, the gentleman named Milt?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, what was happening, these guys on this side, so these were all business owners, all entrepreneurs, and they were supporters of World Renew, this church outreach, right? And they were starting to ask the question. It's just God, you know, awakening people, right? Their questions were, what can we do as business people besides be the funders? And so I met him. I actually met him at a MEDA, a Mennonite Economic Development Associate summit in Toronto. Okay. And then they came out to Kenya and to see the work, and that's really where I got it became clear to me, because just like I was affirmed in my church in 1978, I was commissioned as an agricultural missionary. And they even had written up, you know, whereas there are 4.2 billion people in the world, and whereas, you know, there's 40% of them are hungry and malnourished, we need missionaries of all kinds, you know, agriculturalists and healthcare workers. They didn't say business people at that time, but I was so affirmed that I could be a missionary and be my, you know, be agriculture and business. And so when they came out and I heard their stories, they had gone to Christian university, Christian college. I went for 8 years, but they were all talking about their business on this hand and ministry over here. And it was that trip that I just thought, I was so convicted, because when I left Bangladesh, my counterpart, Abdus Salam, said to me, "Doug, we've been doing this all wrong." I said, "What are you talking about? We got the best thing in the world." And he said, "If we don't get the rich Bengalis to care about the poor Bengalis, it's always going to be a Bideshi problem, you know, a foreigner, a missionary." Right. And so his words came back about rich and poor, because I saw these really wealthy Christian American business owners, and there was almost like a longing, a lack of there was something missing in the Kenyans who were economically poor. There was this, you know, this joy and this fullness and this togetherness. And it just was such a contrast to see that and watch what happened when they came together, and the conversations we would have at night. And when they were going back from their trip, you could almost feel a sadness in them about what they were going back to, right? And so his words, connect rich and poor, they just burned in my head. And then the thing about, here's the folks that know how to create wealth, and here's the folks that need the opportunity. Just like when I went to Bangladesh, the farmers have the talent, but they don't have the access. So it was two things, rich and poor, but it was business people, because it just convicted me. We were working with everyone except the entrepreneur, the very people that, and so that's what got us to leave Africa and come back and start this. And the vision was, you know, a worldwide movement of business people who profess their faith and love for Jesus Christ, so that rich and poor, individuals and groups, communities and nations will be transformed to more completely reflect the kingdom of God. That was the original vision statement I wrote, because coming out of that 19 years of that context, it was that, let's bring these folks together.
Wow. And Partners Worldwide was born.
That was Partners Worldwide born. And then, and we just before this, Ryan, we had our global leadership team on, and we're doing Vista 2030 planning right now. Yeah. And we got respondents from a couple hundred people in our stakeholders, our local partners, local entrepreneurs, the business affiliates, who is a term for our volunteers, who they partner long term. They're not volunteers to go do something for a gig. It's a long term partnership. And then our staff and our board. And it was amazing to see. I was just thinking about it, because we always had vision, mission was always on the top. It's a great vision, great mission, but the frustration was, how do you do it? And they're, you know how business people are. I mean, they're like me. They're impatient. They want, and they're never satisfied. But it's really hard. It was really hard to do this from a distance, and everybody said, you can't do it. And some of those guys said to me, we're going to figure it out. And so what I was so gratified today about and looking at this data was there was such the things that people most value and most appreciated over this last period with COVID and about partners. It was spirituality, relationship, connection. It was encouragement. It was the networking, and it was the training, the mentoring. And it wasn't about all the technical stuff. It was all about the relationship, because that's what sustained and held us together. The communication, the encouragement. And so I was thinking, wow, we
always say in our community, business is relationships.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. When I came back and started meeting these business folks, we had this vision for this worldwide movement. People would say, how many you got now? I said, I got 25. Right. And then I'm looking at so it was hard, but everyone I talked to, I talked to these business owners, and they say, oh man, you're a hero. Maybe I'll sell my business and go be like you. And I'd say to them, why would you do that?
Right.
I'd go in their business and I'd see the stuff they were doing. And I'd go back to the church and say, you guys, they're doing what we're talking about. Yeah. You were talking about servant leadership. They're talking about empowerment. You talk about ownership. You talk about community impact. And I remember going to Pella, Iowa in 1997, and it was a small community, but I went there and I saw these businesses that had started out locally, and now they're global. They're global all over the world. And I said, there's no poverty here. There's no poverty. And okay, granted, it's pretty homogeneous community, but if they can do it here in Pella, we can do it in Nairobi. We can do it in Arua, Uganda. We can do it all over the world. And because if we help business people in their calling, when we talk to our business people as customer, what can we help? They wanted to grow in their faith, their ministry, and their stewardship. Yeah. And if we do that for business owners, they'll take care of the problem of poverty all over the world.
That's right. Give me some. I love these. So guys, you got to get this book. But is there a story in here you want to highlight, or just to tell my audience about one of the people in here, or maybe even somebody outside of this book, that give them an idea of exactly what you guys are doing with a real life example?
Yeah. So we started out with, so when I came back, we took business people over and we met with business people from Kenya, and then we went around and we thought, should we do these? Should we do like go in a tax-free zone and do a larger business and employ people that way? And we met all types of, talked to ministers, and we it was a 3-day conference, but we landed on, there was one guy, Simon Ngero, who was at that conference, and you could see he was, or at that meeting, you could see that he was a little bit out of sorts, because he was, he wasn't, as they say in Kenya, he wasn't the big fish. You could see he was just a startup kind of guy. But he had, I think he had 10 employees, and we had brought him here even before this event. No, it was after it. He met some business people here. He was in metalworks, and they helped them with plating and polishing. And he grew that. He started in his home, and he was a pastor also. He had churches, but he started in his home, and then he grew, and he had maybe 5 employees when we.
What was his business again?
It's Thimelworks.
Okay.
It's called Thimelworks, but he was plating, metalworks.
Okay.
And,
yes.
And I just got from our staff in Kenya. They had a Kenyan television interviewed him.
Wow.
And it's 35 minutes and talked about him, his story from startup to where he is today. It's over 30 years in existence, and he has transformed his community. And he's gone through so much, because Kenya, they allow tax-free imports of bicycles and manufactured stuff, but they tax steel, right? And it comes from it's a legacy from the British colonial days. But it's what I'm saying is it's not a very friendly environment to people like him.
Yeah.
But anyway, when we met him, I said to one of our partners, if we have 10,000 Simon and Gurus around the world, because we wanted to create 100,000 jobs in the industry, we'll do this. But I'm just telling you, he is the prototype. He started this group, CHESS, Christian Entrepreneurs Savings and Credit Cooperative, because we said, are there more people like you? He said, oh, there's lots of us. And it was the folks they weren't micro and they weren't informal. They were formal businesses, but there was nobody serving them.
Yeah.
Right. They were too large for the micro services, and no one in the formal sector, businesses, anyone would look at them.
Right.
But he, and I hadn't even thought about that. He's the guy, he is an amazing leader, but he is the guy that we built this entire model on globally. Every context different, but the idea of people that are serious, they're not people that want to start business. They're people already in business. They believe in it. And how can we help them grow? Just like those farmers in Bangladesh that are in agriculture, they're not going, Ryan, I wouldn't ask you, do you want to go start a farm and I'll give you money for it? No. I mean, that can happen too, but you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So, yeah. So he's one person, and just, what changed in his life and what changed. So Milt Kyers, Milt Kyers is one business that he went to, and Milt's in Milwaukee, and he's just an outstanding businessman and leader as well. But when Simon went and saw his company, he asked Milt talks about this in the book. He asked Milt, how many families do you have working for you? And Milt was just taken aback because he had never thought about his employees. He was a good employer. Yeah. Right. But he had thought of them as jobs, not families. And so Milt's asking him, Milt's adding it up. He says, no, Simon said, how many people do you have working here? And Milt adds it up, he says, about 500. And Simon says, you have an awesome responsibility for 500 families. Yes. And Milt was just taken back like, wow, and like I said, he was a great employer, and people, but he hadn't thought about it that way. So what I'm trying to say, Ryan, is that what happened in these partnerships is what happened. It's like iron sharpening iron in the body of Christ. If you think about the body of Christ, Paul talks about, you can talk about the arm and the eyes and the hand and all that. And you can think about that as gifting, but you can also think about it globally. You've got that map behind you, so you can think about the body of Christ. Uganda is a piece of the body of Christ, and just the that global body and learning from each other. So what happened is these folks, when they went out, just what happened to me in Bangladesh, when they would go out and start working with local business owners, first in Kenya, and then what happened is they came back and said, Doug, these guys, they're really living out their faith and business is not separated. They have there's not all these laws and legal things, but they were just so convicted about that their business is really is their ministry. Yes. And they're starting every day. Simon, he started every day with an hour in the Word. Yes. And our Africa director, Martin Matuku, it was his first job as a CEO. And he talks about that. 2 hours with Simon early in the morning before the company would start. Wow. Or no, with CHESS, not FEMAworks. And Simon mentoring him. Yes. And so that's what happened, Ryan. These folks would just come back and say, wow, they were convicted by what they learned to do things differently here. And those folks were blessed, convicted to do things differently there, from the best of here and the best of there. Wow. And that's what came full circle with our board in 2008 when we had the Great Recession. And it was a 9 awakening in awareness. People were saying, we're kind of hypocritical. We shouldn't be exporting anything we're not doing here first. So it started to become do it do it in your business, do it in your home community,
Yeah.
and then do it globally.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. So
Awesome.
yeah.
I want to get into
just the ability, just work, I
Yeah.
do want to say this, people come, people hear a job, oh, my job, and, not very many people say, thank God it's Monday, right?
Right.
That's what you should, right? But I'm just telling you, when mothers and fathers separate, they immigrate, people as human beings, you can't do this if you're not a human being. They care for their families and their children. They will go to all ends to do that, right? So you have globally, we talk about immigration reform here in the States. It's global. You go to Dubai and there's people from every country. We have partners there, and people are going there, and they're going there for 3 years where work their tails off, and they go back home. We are training them, working with them before they go back in their country. But I'm just saying, it's everywhere in the world. The whole world is going everywhere, and that's what I see God doing with refugees and Exodus, is where we've gotten to a point where there's maybe negative population growth, like in Europe.
Yes.
God's bringing the answer for honestly, his vision for ushering all nations. His answer to their need is the very thing they don't want, right? But a job. You think about Genesis and job, and the blessing of work, not the curse of work.
Right.
The blessing. It was the original blessing, not the curse.
Yes, that's right.
And the marketplace, what God has envisioned for the marketplace, and work, work. And like you said, business is relationship. You can't do any business alone. No. Business is the best community building thing you can do when it's done right.
Yes. Wow.
This
is good stuff. I love this conversation. Just love listening to everything you're saying. You had a friend named John Vanderplug that talked to you and told you about in your book that you have a ladder. It's on page 13.
Yeah.
He describes the ladder, and I know there are business people in my audience. So guys, for those of you listening, the ladder essentially that John was saying is like the missionaries at the top, the Mother Teresa's, the people that sell everything and go serve the poor overseas. Those are at the top of, the holy ladder or something. Like God sees them as most noble, most holy, doing his work. Underneath them, you got the pastors, and then underneath them, you might have firemen and policemen and school teachers. And underneath that's the business people. Workers. Yes. Yeah. Underneath that's the business, us as business people. And that thinking is so prevalent. Even as a business owner, I hear it from other business owners thinking that, if I was really going to be following God's will for my life, I'd have to be a pastor or a missionary, and that those are the people that are truly doing God's work. Can you just encourage the people that know that they're supposed to be in business, but don't really feel like it's a godly thing?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. So as you're saying that, I go right back to that informal settlement in Kenya where, you got, it wasn't Kibera, that it was close to there, but that's where we were standing, and the sewage is running down. It's at the end of the trip. It's hot, it's dusty, and we're talking to these entrepreneurs, and that's when John said, Doug, here's the thing. In the church, in the eyes of the church, and I didn't know this about him at the time. And this guy he just exudes leadership, right? He's with the Lord. He just went to the Lord earlier this year, and his last text to me was, Doug, I can't wait to meet you in heaven. What a joyful day that will be. That's the last words on my phone.
Wow.
Because I couldn't go be with him because of COVID, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sending him he was on his email to the end. But so they were standing there, and John, and he says, here's the thing, Doug, in the eyes of the church, you're on the top of the ladder because you're a missionary. And then pastors come next, and then teachers and social workers and doctors and nurses. And he said, but the business person isn't even on the ladder. And so you think about where I was in Bangladesh and India, where this caste system with the lower caste is, it's 300 million people, right? And so that was my image, as he's going through this. You're not, because when you're an outcast, so I was thinking of him saying that as a business people are outcasts. And he said, we hear sermons about the evils of money, not the love of money. We get stories about the rich oppressing the poor. People think that we got our wealth. I just started this business to support my family. I had no idea I was ever going to have any wealth, right? But he said, everyone's coming to us for our money from Monday to Saturday. And he said, can we be partners? Can we use our experience, our lessons, hard knock lessons of life, our management, our leadership experience, and business experience? Can we be part of the solution to ending poverty and bringing about the kingdom of God and not be seen as part of the problem? And it just hit me. He said, can we be partners? And that was the clarifying call. Just like when I said the call to go to Bangladesh, that was a clarifying call right there from him. That question, if I'm serious about my commitment to the Lord back in Bangladesh, I'll spend my lifetime ending poverty. This is the way we got to do it. We got to do it through business. Business people were not anywhere in the mix at that time, and now they are, of course, right? Yeah. But then I find out later when I went to John's church to speak at his church, I walk in there, and on the wall is all these line of pastors, right? And there is his father. So I find out his father is a pastor. His grandfather was a pastor and the editor of our banner. And so when John got up there and introduced me and said, Partners allows me, he describes as a little old business guy. He felt they're affirmed for their holy calling, just like I felt affirmed, when I went to Bangladesh. And so really that's our message. God desires everyone to flourish. Business is a holy calling.
It is.
And business is the way. It's the only way to end poverty. I don't care where you go, any community you go to, you can have as many schools, you can have as many, if you don't have a flourishing economic environment, the community is it's never going to flourish, right? And then partnerships are the way to ensure not only sustainability, but that everyone flourishes and not just a few.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And then, and God does. This idea that the poor will be with you always is so taken out of context. Jesus is only talking to his disciples who were beating up on this lady.
Right.
But listen, don't beat up on her. She just anointed me for my burial. But I'm going to be gone in 48 hours. You're going to have the poor with you till you die.
Right.
And we're all going to be poor in some way until heaven and earth are reunited and Jesus comes. But this idea that we're going to have we can have extreme. No, it's an abomination to the Lord that in today's world and the wealth that we have and the technology and the ability to connect in relationship that anyone doesn't have. There should be no one living in extreme poverty, and it will be history.
Absolutely. And then when you give somebody a job, give them economic opportunity, that gives you a platform to speak into their life spiritually, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, because what happens in any relationship? It always devolves to, why am I here? And where am I going? And it always goes to purpose. It always goes to the essence of being human and being spiritual. It always goes there. And the greatest thing is when we just had this from our partners in Myanmar, where they're going through some really difficult times, and there are so many people coming to being baptized.
Yes.
because they're saying, this is unbelievable, what you're doing for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always say the greatest acknowledgement of my faith or my walk is when people ask me
Mm-hmm.
about my faith, as opposed to me beating them up, right?
Yes.
When people
Absolutely.
ask me because of what somebody just a few weeks ago in Sioux Falls, we had dinner with a couple of folks on a board there, and they said to me, Doug, can you talk about, they were talking about critical race theory and racism, and they said, Doug, you've lived this. Is this real? They asked me about my what I thought about all this, and I could share it. I could share it because it's real through the lives of my kids, and that's how the gospel is. If you're living the gospel, people are going to want to know what's going on.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I increasingly in the world, the only church people might experience is in the business where they work. So think about that.
Absolutely. So my audience, I know some of them are like pricked right now. Their hearts are pricked. They're like, I want to help. How can what are some way, obviously, Partners Worldwide needs financial donations. We can talk about that. What are some ways business owners can come alongside and support you guys and what you're doing?
Oh, wow. So yeah, so I always say, and that's why I ask people their story. You see what God's doing in their heart. So we have a partner, I just talked about him yesterday, that he's involved with partners. And he's gone down on trips, but he's in the building business. He builds, designs, restores. And so when he really comes alive, it's about housing for the poor.
Yes.
Right. Well, that's very integral to a flourishing community, right? Home ownership. Yes. And so I would say to your audience, and I've said this to mentoring some younger leaders. They're saying, what would you tell us, if you could go back, what would you tell yourself 20 years ago? And what would you tell us? And I say, reflect on because it's connected. Your passion of your heart, the passion of your heart is connected. The more it's connected to what you do, the more synergy. So I'd say, so I'm rambling here now. I'm sorry, Ryan.
Okay, that's all right.
Really, we were talking about this today, because when you see what's the most valuable, the business mentoring, the training, it's the relationship. So I would say, we're trying to get more people connected. So even we have some mentoring relationships virtually now. You can't do that without the context of the local institution and the long relationship of trust. But there's that possibility. But I would say both where you are, we're always trying to connect business people here together, and then globally. Yeah. And so yes, there's ways you can be a trainer, you could be a mentor. Usually we can, and increasingly you can do it locally, locally right here in the US.
Yeah.
And then yes, and you can get involved in I don't call it a donor, I call it a financial partner. And we have different ways and different ways you can do entry, and then, but what we're trying to do is get a meaningful relationship, whether you travel or not. I guess going globally, more and more people say that's like the Marines, it's not for everyone.
Right.
But I would say, if anyone here is listening to this and God's tugging on your heart, I've found so many people go on trips, and then often that's where God will put things together as well. But it can happen right here really as well.
Awesome. The website's partnersworldwide.org. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. I'll have a link in the show notes. Doug, thank you so much for being on with me. I'm this was so fun. I get to meet you and hear your story. And thank you for what you're doing to, be Jesus to the world.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. I'm the marketplace, God's, honestly, the marketplace, and flourishing. And I mean that for all of everything, creation, the physical order, but it's the marketplace that, the longer I live, I see God's just dream for what that can be for his people. And and
you're doing it. Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Well,
thank you,
we'll talk
Ryan.
soon. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Streams of Income with self-help author Ryan Rieger. From right here in the Dallas Metroplex, Ryan teaches several entrepreneurial courses and group coaching programs to students all over the world. Be sure to listen next week at the same time for Streams of Income with Ryan Rieger.